Only one opening that you will ever need under 2000 ELO. This starts with the move d6, call it Philidor defense, call it Old Indian defense, depending on what the opponent will do. And this one is even called English red defense, something like that. It's absolutely amazing because you can play it against everything and against anyone, and you don't need to memorize any stuff at all. You just need to know where your pieces belong. But why? The reason you don't need to memorize, because you don't really care what your opponent is doing. As long as you do those moves, you're always good to go. And I'm gonna illustrate what kind of plans you have afterwards. I don't want to say just, yeah, I have shown you the opening moves, good luck playing that. No, I show you how you do afterwards, what kind of ideas you have. And of course, this video is for all of those guys who are saying, yeah, this is just such a bad opening, a passive one, you're miserable and stuff like that. I never get it, because I'm never miserable in this opening. I really enjoy, genuinely like this opening, and I have played it for 10 years now. I have achieved so much with it, from the bottom to the really top level. I have become international master with it, so I can say with 100% certainty, this is a great opening. You just need to understand the ideas and implement it the right way. Here is how you do it. Yeah, you see, I mean, this is one of the possible ways for him to play. He could have played e4, d4, knight f3. He could have played some weird stuff. I don't really care. I always do the same thing. I put the pawn on d6, on e5, the knight on f6, the knight on d7, the bishop goes to e7, I castle, and then this key move c6. This is the only 7 moves that you need to remember. And then you have so many different ideas. We are going to have a plan to attack here on the queen side, or we are going to have a plan to put some pressure on our opponent in the center. Of course, depending on what the opponent is doing, we are going to have some additional ideas, and I'm going to illustrate that as well. For example, if he plays that, in some variations, we are going to have this knight h5 and knight f4 idea, very interesting one. Again, it's not passive. Yes, it might somehow look for you passive if you are not experienced, if you don't have experience with it, if you haven't tried it yourself. But those pieces, at some point, they just spring to life. They have so many interesting opportunities here. First, we are just solid because we play as black. I mean, it's normal to be solid as black. It's essential, in fact, to get a very good position, to get your pieces out, and afterwards you're going to overtake the initiative and start creating those threats. First, you need to make sure that, well, you're not checkmated. Your opponent cannot attack you immediately, and in this case, it's basically not possible. Like, show me how white can create here problems. This opening is great for Blitz and Rapid for the reason that you can implement it in no time. Once you do know, and after a few games, that would take you just 1 second to implement all of those pawns, as long as you don't blunder all of those moves, as long as you don't blunder that pawn on e5. So if you can do it immediately, you can play it immediately. But then if your opponent is attacking it, just make sure you don't blunder it and defend it. Otherwise, you implement the same moves against everything, so it would take you just a few seconds to do that. And your opponent will need to think about it because he sees such a position once out of 1000. For example, I have researched that statistics on lead chess and the Philidor defense with the move e5, only 1 player out of 1000 plays. So for your opponent, it's going to be so much difficult, and you're going to have so much experience in it because you play it every single time. So, okay, now we have done our setup, those 7 moves, and we are good to go to continue. Remember, I have said that we have 2 plans. We can either play on the queen side or we can play in the center, depending on what the situation is, what kind of setup our opponent chose. Here, we can play in the center. There is absolutely nothing stopping us from playing e4 immediately here. At least I cannot see it. If he takes, we can at least take back with the knight and protect that pawn. If he doesn't take, then he has to go backwards. I mean, his knight is under attack at the end of the day. And then we can support it with the second central pawn on d5. What can be better than that? As black, we already cross the half board mark with our pawn, we go forward. Now he has to go backwards. I mean, this is literally the best case scenario when you make an active move, you go forward and your opponent goes backwards. So this is fantastic. Now we have a very solid pawn structure here, 4 pawns. Of course, our opponent can and should create some threats against it. Maybe take here and play queen b3, trying to attack, or maybe play f3 and attack from this side. I mean, it's chess. It's not like you have a certain opening in chess that is like winning automatically every time. If it would be like that, first of all, everyone would play that, and second, chess wouldn't be interesting. That's exactly the point, that with this opening, you can play it every time, so it's very easy to play. That's what we need. We don't want to be stuck in memorizing for ages those, for example, Sicilian defense. I played myself. It's a very aggressive opening. It's a good opening, but there is a significant drawback. You have to memorize so much stuff. Otherwise, you're kind of lost, and I have already lost so many games in the Sicilian exactly for a reason that I just don't have it in my memory. It's so difficult to memorize everything. Whereas here, you can just play schematically. You can just understand where your pieces belong, what kind of plans you have afterwards, and you can just go for it. Okay, maybe if you make a mistake, you're gonna have some difficulties, but you're not gonna lose the game. Which is definitely the case in so many lines in the Sicilian defense. But I make my videos. I have created an entire series. The only opening you need as black, please take a look at those so that you understand how to react against different move orders, against different plans from the opponent, so that no matter what, you know what to do. Hey, I have even created an entire opening course based on this opening for black, 10-day opening mastery. You get a full holistic opening repertoire, both for white and for black. And there I go into all of the details, like 1,000 times deeper what you can do depending on what the opponent can do, what kind of additional opportunities you get. But even here with these YouTube videos, you can already get this understanding what kind of ideas you have and how to execute it in your games. So you're going to be good to go. Okay. So as I said, our opponent is trying to create some difficulties here, attacking the d5 pawn, putting some pressure. That's what he should do. That's the reason why he's top 1% of all of the chess players. He's playing pretty good. But we have to fight against that. The first move I see here is to play h6, create a threat. So yes, he's creating a threat to win our pawn. But if he can create an even more dangerous threat to win his piece, then it's even cooler, right? And the point is, if he takes here trying to win this pawn afterwards, then we are going to take with our knight and we are going to connect another defender to the pawn on d5 and we don't have any problems. So he has to choose now whether he wants to take or he wants to go backwards somewhere. Yes, like this bishop f4 move, but then we don't have this problem, for example, anymore. Now we do need to deal with this problem somehow. The pawn on d5 is hanging. I see two ways. We can play knight to b6 and attack this guy on c4, and if he plays c5, then we go back, and then there is no pressure against the d5 pawn anymore. But we do lose 2 tempi here. I mean, this is for a reason. I never want to lose time without any reason. In this case, the reason seems to be good enough. But we also have an alternative. We can just take that pawn. The drawback of that is that we do give our opponent 2 central pawns without any pawns from our side, which might be dangerous if like he goes forward. So I'm less excited about that option. But we can compensate it with some activity, play knight d5, attacking those guys. Actually, that's pretty forcing. So takes, I play knight b6. If he takes, then maybe we even take with the queen. Because, again, we create a counterplay. It's always very important to create some counter threats against your opponent. You don't want to be passive. But yeah, I still somehow don't like giving those pawns to him. Let me play knight b6 because that is more in the spirit of the Philidor defense. Now, again, my opponent has a choice. Like if he takes, it's never a problem. Then we can even take with the pawn. Yes, we are going to have an isolated pawn, but that stops 2 of his pawns. Or we can take with the knight because even though, again, he has 2 central pawns against 0, but in this case, we have a beautiful knight and he has basically no ways to deal with this problem because either we are going to win his bishop or he has to go back, but then we are going to attack that pawn. Okay, he goes backwards. he goes forward, so we need to go backward, but we have achieved this goal of having this beautiful pawn structure. Yes, he can of course play e4, but that's a completely different story, because we are going to exchange as much stuff as possible, bring our second knight to f6 to control this. Yes, he actually goes for it, so I'm going to be able to illustrate my point to you. In fact, I don't think it's anything dangerous, because I play knight f6. I don't care if he takes with the knight. Yes, I think he should take with the knight. And then I play knight f6, and I control this d4 pawn. I mean, ideally, maybe I want even to go there with my knight. And I bring new pieces into the game. Maybe the only active thing he has, yes, exactly, this move knight to d6. I mean, I like it. My opponent is playing well here, so I can show you how to use this opening if you have a pretty advanced opponent and he's playing pretty good. I still don't think that there is anything dangerous. I can even take this guy. He takes it, I play rook to e8, and everything is good. He has a pair of bishops, but the position is not that opened, so he can take advantage of that. Even knight to d5 is still coming. The alternative is to play knight d5 immediately, because in this case, this bishop is under attack. And yes, he can take. Yeah, I'm not sure about the resulting position, whether I like it more than the alternative here to take that. Yes, I do like this one more. Why? Because I'm gonna choose later where my knight is going. Maybe I'm gonna play knight e4 and attack this guy. Maybe I'm gonna just bring my bishop. Because if you think about it, if in this situation I'm gonna exchange a pair of bishops, I'm gonna have this knight against this bishop. And his key central pawns, they're on the dark squares, which is bad if you have dark squares bishop. Why? Because he has a lot of holes in terms of light squares, which my knight will be able to use. For example, the knight on d5 would be just a monster, a fantastic piece. And his bishop, I mean, his own pawns are reducing his potential a lot. Because of those pawns, he cannot do anything. Like, he can play, yes, that's the only idea, but as long as I push him backwards, somehow this bishop is pretty much useless. Okay, he goes, yeah, again, I like what he's doing. Before I'm executing that, he tries to create some threats against me and make use of his pair of bishops. That's what he should do. However, I think I'm still in time. Like, yes, you can exchange those pawns, and maybe the c6 pawn would be more vulnerable than otherwise, but it's not that difficult to create any big problems against it, and otherwise I still achieve my goal. I place my bishop on d5. And then this pawn on d4 becomes backwards, and so yeah, his central activity, central game is kind of stuck, and that is what I mean with this opening. It feels at some point that, yeah, white is active, controlling the center, can create some threats, but when you actually try to do it, you notice that there are no threats you can create. You just need to be careful about your opponent's activity, as in any of openings, of course, but yeah, you have so much potential. You have so many interesting ideas. Like you have seen in this game, we have launched our attack in the center. Our opponent has tried to put pressure on our pawn structure, which is what he is supposed to do. But then we have used those squares that became available thanks to the fact that the pawns are gone. And we provoked him, by the way, for that move c5. And I have told you that it's going to be great because he doesn't have any pressure against this d5 pawn and later on d5 square. And so now we are taking advantage of that. The next step of our strategy is somehow to use our knight here against, like, the good knight against the bad bishop. Let's see whether we are going to be successful. We never want to take with the bishop, because then he's going to have those pawns. I mean, yes, he can just push it immediately. So that is something we never want to do. We want to make sure that this pawn on d4 basically never moves, and we want to blockade it. The knight in front of the isolated pawn or in front of the backwards pawn, so that there are no pawns to attack this knight, is always the best possible position. And of course, the knight in the center in general is beautiful because it controls so many squares and has so many ideas to go forward. And basically, there is nothing stopping us. Yes, he's even doing it himself. And now finally we reach what we wanted to reach, this position with a good knight against the bad bishop. Of course, I mean, I have to admit that our opponent is still pretty active. He still can create a few threats, and we need to be careful with that. We cannot just say, our position is beautiful and we win. That's not how it normally works in chess. And again, it shouldn't work like that. But we have a very good advantage, strategically speaking, because we have a good knight against the bad bishop. And once we are able to somehow deal with those threats, a few threats he can create here, then we are gonna start, getting some activity of our own. For example, rook e3 seems to be a great move. But first, as always, we think, what is our opponent's threats? What is his idea? Of course, he wants to just win this pawn with the check. We cannot allow that. Now we have to think, how can we stop it? I see two ways, queen d7 and queen f6. Of course, we never consider, we cannot even do that because that square is covered. But even if there wouldn't be a bishop, we never want to consider moves like rook f8, because that would make our pieces passive. That is the last thing we want to consider. Okay, queen d7 or queen f6. Queen f6 is more active. It creates some ideas, some threats, but we need to answer the fundamental question whether we want to go into the endgame. I do think that the endgame is nothing bad for us, because then the checkmate attack is not possible anymore. And we are going to continue trying to take advantage of our knight. At the same time, queen d7 is also creating a threat. Rook to e3 here would be very unpleasant for him. So I assume his idea is to play rook e1, but then we can exchange basically all of the rooks, take ones, and then play rook e8. And we are going to have, in fact, I want to do that to show you how it's powerful. We are going to have a combination of the queen and the knight. And that is a very scary combination. You can create so many threats against your opponent with this combination. So let's see how that would work. I mean, hopefully it's gonna work. There is no guarantee. I'm not a perfect chess player. I'm making mistakes here and there, so I might blunder something. But we have a good potential, and that is thanks to this opening that we have played in the first place. Yes. I mean, I can also play, there are different ideas here. I can also play rook e6, because if he takes, I'm gonna take it back, and he doesn't have that move rook e1. And if he doesn't take, then I want to play rook a to e8 and create a threat of my own. So basically we have a fight now for the open file. The rooks love the open files. Remember that, please, and always try to control the open files with your rooks. He can play something like queen to g4, trying to fork in my queen here. For example, knight d3 wouldn't work because he can just take and my queen is still hanging. But I can still play rook a to e8. I don't know if he has any ideas. Maybe something like bishop e5 and then f6. But f6 I can always play it, right? My knight is protecting that. That's the beauty of this knight. It's working both in the attack and in the defense at the same time. So the more I think about it, the more I like the move rook e6. So let me try it. I mean, again, rook takes e1 was a completely comfortable alternative, and I think one way or another we are gonna come to that position with the queen and knight against queen and bishop. But if I can, I want to get even a better version of it, if I can win the control of the e-file, because if I just exchange and play rook e8, he can also just defend his rook with the queen there, and he's still fighting for the e-file. Here I thought I can play f6, because I don't care about light square's weaknesses. He has dark square's bishop, so how can he use that? Maybe he wants to sacrifice. That is something I haven't thought about it. My knight is so beautiful, so maybe he wants to sacrifice there. But I don't think it's enough. He gets one pawn for an exchange. I can bring my rook somewhere, and even in the worst case scenario, take that bishop, and I'm gonna have a slight edge because his pawn is vulnerable. And otherwise, if he takes on a6, I'm gonna just take it back. And again, seems like I'm winning that fight for the e-file. I mean, I can play rook e8, that's an alternative, but I think he's gonna play that. Then I play f6, and we are kind of reaching the same position. So I prefer to play f6 immediately. Because if he takes, I take it, and then I play rook e8, then I'm in total control of the e-file. He is not in time to bring his rook there. Let's see what my opponent does here. Again, notice the time situation. Because I have played this opening, I don't really need to spend any time, and if you're gonna start playing it, that would be the same for you. We always have more time in a moment in the game where it really matters, in the middle game and in the end game that we are coming to. That is, of course, a very important factor, because it's an additional pressure on my opponent. He has to decide what he does here. Yes, I'm thinking that his idea is to take here and sacrifice that, and he is trying to understand whether it's going to be enough afterwards, but I hope it's not, because like, it's very difficult to put those pawns into motion. Yes, that's a conclusion my opponent reached as well. But now I just take. I won this psychological battle, so to say, because this file, I mean, this is not the only open file, this one is open as well, but this is a central one, so it's more important. And yes, he's trying to exchange. I don't know, I have a risky option to like go for this stuff, but I don't think this pawn is so important. And yeah, in this case, maybe my opponent will indeed, or maybe this way, create some threats for me, attack this pawn. I don't want to allow all of that. Why would I need to take that risk? What I can do, however, I can just grab this queen, exchange the queens, and again here take the full control of the center. I mean, I have to be a little bit careful about that sacrifice, but again, I never think it's possible. My king is close enough. No, that's not an option. And otherwise, I'm threatening to play rook e2 here, or rook e4, attacking that guy. This cannot be good for him. And of course, I want to bring my king at some point. This rook on f5, by the way, is very unfortunate. If he plays king f2, for example, he still needs a few tempi. Yeah, maybe that is his idea, actually, rook f3. So maybe I need to be fast. I'm, again, a little bit careful with that move, so let me check it. c6. I cannot... but I can still take this guy, right? c7, I just play rook c4. Yes, I'm in time to stop it, and otherwise I'm attacking that pawn. And then I will create more threats for him, so I do think I'm here in the upper hand. And again, this bishop is really bad. It's not creating any problems for me at all. And with my knight in the center, control so much squares and potentially have a lot of ideas. The beauty of this knight is that you don't necessarily need to move it immediately. It just stands there, and it is great. It limits the opponent's potential a lot. It creates a lot of potential ideas. Okay, I think I take it, and yes, my opponent's idea is to grab this pawn, which, yeah, makes a lot of sense, by the way. So I have to think, how do I react to it? I like the knight b4 idea, because then I'm threatening rook d2 check, or maybe I should start with rook d2, in fact. And I attack this guy, because if I start, although knight b4, he cannot play king e3, because I have knight c2 check and I'm winning the rook. But maybe he will play something like king e2, stopping my check. In that case, I can play a6 and stop him from taking that pawn, but he has something like that. Yeah, probably it's more reasonable to start with the check. And now I have that move knight b4, because I definitely don't want to allow him to get a passer there and then push it. That might be scary. And also, when you fight against the knight against the bishop, you always want to have pawns on one side of the board, because then the knight would be stronger. If, however, you have pawns on the both sides of the board, then the bishop might stand in the center and control both wings simultaneously. The knight is not capable of doing that. Okay, he attacks the pawn. The good thing is my knight is still protecting it, but he prepares some threats here. And finally, his bishop might be dangerous there. I can, of course, stop that, but it feels like I would be quite passive there. Although I might do it. I might do it for some time to stabilize the situation so that those ideas are not dangerous for me, and then I'm gonna bring my king. Because right now I cannot play that. Bishop f8 is very annoying. Yes, I like that. And if he plays rook b7, then I'm gonna play knight d5, and he has no ways to attack that pawn. And here I wanted to give a check. Maybe he wants to go there, but I still have king h7, and that should be fine. Or maybe he wants to go this way. Then let me start with king h7. Yes, he does have that idea. One way for me to stop it is to play rook e8, and after that to play rook e4. I don't think this works. Although, again, I would need to be careful with that idea. That's a blunder, right? I just play knight to d5 now, and that is just attacking both of the pieces at the same time. Yeah, okay. I guess that's because of the time pressure that my opponent blundered here. But again, all of that happened because we were able to play faster in the opening, and we didn't need to think a lot of time because we have such a flexible opening. Okay, I do have a check here, but I'm not sure I want to exchange the rooks. I think the simplest is always to bring more pieces into the game, and as long as I bring my king, 99% of the players under 2000 ELO are forgetting about that, that the king is such a powerful piece in the endgame, and you absolutely have to use it. Okay, and now I need, like, the only dangerous idea that my opponent might have is this pawn, and as long as I stop it, he doesn't have anything, so he resigns. So this is exactly how you beat everyone under 2000 ELO with this beautiful opening. If you want to see more examples of how do you use this opening to crush everyone under 2000 ELO in terms of different variations that might happen, then in this playlist you have so many different videos so that you are fully prepared against anything that might happen.